Welcome to the European Association for Higher Education Advancement's YouTube and podcast channel. We're going to be talking about how to make your lectures more dynamic and engaging.
That's right.
And we're using a guide straight from the EAHEA themselves. Talk about going right to the source. If you're prepping a lecture and maybe feeling a little intimidated about how to keep your students really engaged,
Sure.
we're going to unpack some practical tips.
The EAHEA knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
They focus on quality assurance and accreditation in higher education.
Yeah.
So this isn't just theory. It's about stuff that actually works in real classrooms.
Okay. So one of the first things that jumped out at me in the guide was their take on using technology in lectures.
Yeah.
It's not just about throwing tech at the problem.
Right.
It's got to be the right tech for the job.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in all the bells and whistles.
Oh, yeah.
Like a fancy PowerPoint with all the animations and transitions.
For sure.
But if it doesn't actually help your students learn the core concepts, it's just a distraction.
It's all flash and no substance.
Exactly. And the same goes for any kind of tech, really.
Like what?
Blended learning,
Bob.
educational videos, even something like gamification. It all comes back to asking yourself, does this specific tool actually help my students learn better? If not, it might be better to leave it out.
So what are some examples of tech that would actually enhance learning?
Good question. The guide doesn't get too specific.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm trying to think of some concrete examples.
Okay.
Like, let's say you're giving a lecture on the French Revolution.
Okay, yeah.
Would you just do like a standard PowerPoint with bullet points?
Well, you could, but I think you could do so much better than that.
Oh, absolutely.
That might put your students to sleep.
For sure.
But imagine if you used some kind of interactive software
Oh, okay.
where they can create a timeline of the French Revolution themselves,
Okay.
adding events, drawing connections between them.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Or what if you embedded primary source documents,
Right.
like letters, diaries, political cartoons from that time period?
So they can like see the real deal.
Exactly. And they can analyze them right there in the lecture.
Wow.
That kind of active engagement with historical sources takes them way beyond just passively listening.
I love that. It's like they become historians themselves,
Exactly.
even if it's just for that one class period.
Right. And that actually ties into the EAHEA's emphasis on interaction in lectures.
They really stress that.
They do. And they're not just saying like, oh, get them talking. They're really highlighting WHY interaction is so crucial for deep learning.
Yeah, they talk about retention and active learning.
It's all connected.
It seems like they're two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. Think about it when students are just passively listening. The information might go in one ear and out the other.
Right.
But when they're actively involved
Okay.
in discussions or debates, or even just asking questions, they're processing the information on a much deeper level,
Makes sense.
which makes it way more likely that they'll remember it.
Okay.
It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking the meal.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
You get a much more visceral understanding
For sure.
through active participation.
So how do we actually create those opportunities for interaction in our lectures?
Right.
How do we get students thinking critically and collaboratively? The guide mentions peer interaction and group work.
Yeah.
But what are some examples that go beyond just like putting them in groups and hoping for the best?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
The EAHEA gives this really cool example called the fishbowl debate.
Okay. I like that name already.
I know, right? So imagine you have a small group of students, maybe 4 or 5, and they're visiting a topic in front of the class.
Oh, okay.
Something controversial, like the ethics of artificial intelligence, for example.
Okay.
And the rest of the class is watching them, observing their arguments, taking notes.
That's cool. So it's like an actual fishbowl.
Exactly. And then you can even switch roles halfway through.
Okay.
So everyone gets a chance to be in the hot seat.
That's a great idea.
It's a really dynamic way to get students thinking critically and practicing their communication skills.
Yeah, and their analytical skills too, right?
Absolutely.
I love that fishbowl debate idea. It's like you create this energy in the classroom where everyone's on the edge of their seat.
Right. It really gets the blood pumping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of something else the EAAB talked about being open to change, like shaking things up. They actually quote someone saying, sometimes change was good.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it was even exactly what you needed.
I love that. And it's so true. I think as lecturers, we can get really comfortable with our routines.
Oh, yeah?
Doing things the way we've always done them. But the world of education is constantly changing.
For sure.
New technologies, new research on learning styles. a whole new generation of students with different needs and expectations.
It's a whole different ballgame than when I first started teaching.
I bet. The EAE is really pushing us to adapt and flow with those changes.
I remember when I first started incorporating technology into my lectures, I was so nervous.
Really?
I thought I had to be this tech wizard.
Oh, yeah.
But I've learned that it's more about being open to experimentation, finding what works for you and your students.
And sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of trying new things, the EAA also emphasizes the importance of feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially from students.
It can be a little nerve-wracking
Oh, yeah.
to put yourself out there like that.
Totally.
But honestly, student feedback is so valuable.
It's like having a direct line to the people you're trying to reach.
Exactly. It helps us avoid repeating the same mistakes. And it gives us the confidence to try new things.
It's a win-win. If something isn't working, our students will tell us.
Yeah, and if they love something, that positive reinforcement encourages us to keep pushing the boundaries.
Totally. So the guide specifically mentions that we shouldn't just rely on those end-of-lecture surveys.
Oh, those. Yeah.
It's often too late by then.
Right.
They suggest getting feedback in the moment.
While the concepts are still fresh in students' minds.
So instead of waiting till the very end of the lecture,
Yeah.
what could we do?
Well, you could sprinkle in some quick checks for understanding throughout the lecture.
Okay.
Like you could do a quick poll using a classroom response system,
Oh, yeah.
or have students do a think, pair, share, or even just ask some open-ended questions to get them talking.
Like that.
And don't underestimate the power of observation.
What do you mean?
Pay attention to their body language,
No.
their facial expressions, the kinds of questions they're asking.
Yeah.
All of that gives you valuable insights into whether or not they're really engaged.
So we've talked about the beginning of the lecture and the middle of the lecture.
Yeah.
But what about the end?
Well, that's important.
Right. How do we wrap things up in a way that leaves a lasting impact?
Well, the EAHEA uses this really cool analogy of bringing the lecture full circle, like a well-structured story.
Well, look, you don't want to just leave them hanging.
Exactly. A good lecture needs a strong ending.
Right. Like a good story needs a good resolution.
Right. So how do we actually create that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The EAA doesn't really give specific tips for closing a lecture,
Okay.
but I think based on everything we've talked about, it's all about bringing those key takeaways back to the forefront.
Oh, okay.
You know, remind the students of the main points you covered,
Right.
but don't just repeat them word for word.
Right.
Reframe them in a way that shows why they matter,
Okay.
why they're relevant to the students' lives.
I like that.
You don't just want them memorizing facts. You want them leaving the lecture feeling like they gained something valuable,
Okay.
something they can actually use outside of the classroom.
Yeah, maybe even leave them with a question. I like that.
Or a challenge
Yes. Something to think about.
to keep those wheels turning.
Exactly. Spark their curiosity. Inspire them to learn more.
That's the goal.
Right?
That's what it's all about.
To make them lifelong learners.
Lifelong learners. Exactly. We don't want our students to see lectures as just like passive information downloads. We want them to be springboards for ongoing exploration and discovery.
So to wrap up our deep dive today,
Yeah.
we've learned from the European Association for Higher Education Advancement that even the most boring topic can become a dynamic and engaging lecture
For sure.
if you approach it the right way.
Absolutely. It's not just about delivering information.
Right.
It's about empowering students to become active participants in their own learning.
And we can do that by using technology thoughtfully,
Yes.
by creating opportunities for interaction, embracing change, getting feedback from our students,
All of that.
and crafting a powerful ending that leaves them with something to ponder.
So to our listeners out there, I'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
What will you do differently in your next lecture based on what we've explored today?
Please don't forget to follow the European Association for Higher Education Advancement on YouTube and social media.